right, so let's get started. I'm sure some people will roll on in as time goes on. Usually the closer we get to the holidays. Okay. So just let yourself sink into your seat. Let your eyes soften and take in the entire room at once. Just anchor them on the floor or on the desk in front of you, just to get them out of the way. And then anchored in this moment, give yourself to your breath. How much of your breath can you experience in this moment? The only way to be here is to be nowhere else. So with every breath, anchor yourself deeper and deeper into the timelessness of this exact moment, this eternal instant. Let everything that is not this moment fall to the ground. Let it drop to the floor for composting. Nothing outside of this moment is relevant to this exact moment you're living. It doesn't matter how beautiful it is, or how messy it is, or how painful it is. There is no reason to hang on to it in this moment. And the beauty of attending classes like this is that you learn how to drop it all at once. So that as you sit here breathing in this moment, the story filter that energy is moving through is completely shifted to something that allows you to recharge and restore. But my problems and my pains are so real, you say. I don't want to pretend they don't exist. You're not pretending anything. To sit in a moment that doesn't engage them and bring them into the space for no reason is to make up a purpose for them somewhere they don't belong. You live a multifarious life. You can't afford to drag the whole story through every single moment. So right now, let it all just drop to the floor. Not because there's anything wrong with pain or negative stories. Not because there's anything to abolish, but simply because they have no relevance to this moment. It's interesting. A person will spend days on end obsessing about a problem. Days on end feeling like everything is wrong because of a single story. But if that person were to go back through every moment that they lived, today, yesterday, the day before, the vast majority of those moments would have nothing to do with that particular painful story. You dragged the pain into it. You forced a square peg into a round hole. But for what? Just a chance to keep the fire of that suffering going? Are you trying to win a contest? It's insanity. But it's the norm, isn't it? Left to our own devices, that's what we do. But everybody in this room at this point has had enough experience with these teachings to know that a simple shift in the attention makes it all drop to the floor. I remember early in my career, people who would receive this kind of advice from me would say that I was out of touch with reality. But am I? Does it really make more sense to drag the worst things of one moment into a moment that gains nothing from its presence? And that's most of the moments in your day. Are you following me? If you're not, you need to stop and ask a question. You could even put it in the chat. It's an important realization I'd like you to have. We don't need to let the pain of one moment smear into every other moment. We can put it on our schedule as something we have to deal with. And then deal with it when it's time. But then you let go of it and you shift your attention. And if you find that hard to do, you have to turn it into a practice. So Anna is saying you get comfortable in the sad story and you'd rather have people be with you than admit they are wrong. You know, it's just about what works. On the one hand, we're human beings designed to seek pleasure and avoid suffering. But we're so far from adept at that we end up suffering most of the time. And anybody who has sat in a class like this knows that a simple shift in the attention can take you right out of it, right out of that whole storyline. You know, and Anna, I think you're right. Sometimes the thing that keeps people from doing that is that maybe they're angry with somebody and they feel like if they stop suffering over it, then it's like giving the other person a pass. But there are no passes in life. You know, for you to store something negative that someone does to you and suffer with it every single day, maybe if they're very sensitive, it'll cause some suffering for them, but the fact is life will take care of it anyways. Right? People who legitimately wrong others in full knowledge and willingness, they don't live great lives. And it's not the reason we're here. To make sure we're never wronged is not the reason we're here. Loss is a vital part of life. It's a vital part of what makes the story compel us towards evolution. You know, someone goes through a period of challenge and formulaic Hollywood movies would make you think that then they struggle, they get on top of it, suddenly they're well and all comes to a good end. And what they don't show you is that good end lasts about 4 minutes. And then the next thing happens. There is a constant trade-off of resources and loss of resources. Financial resources, loss of financial resources. Love resources, loss of love resources. Life is this constant inflow and outflow. You can't have a story without it. Just because we package our stories on TV to end at the upswing doesn't mean the downswing doesn't come 15 seconds later. That's right, Anna, waves of life. Another way to say that is that it's cyclical. Everything's going in a circle. But a wave is also a circle. If you take these 2 points and flip them, you have a circle. I've been with spiritual teachers who, their biggest pitch is that if you can just get control over the mind, you live in a state of ecstasy. You live in a state where you never suffer, and, that your suffering is just your lack of freedom. And, I'm a wholehearted person. So I go to those teachers and dissolve whatever life I'm living and sit at their feet for like a decade. And if you pay close enough attention, you come to see that they're suffering as much as everybody else. In a lot of ways, they're a bigger mess because they have stepped out of the mechanism of feedback, right? They're beyond reproach. And before you know it, they're asking you to do all sorts of things that are just not right. I just don't think that the storyline of do this and you won't have to suffer ever again is a true story. I think the truth is the avoidance of suffering perpetuates suffering and magnifies it. This need to conserve every resource that you have actually blocks you up and keeps resources from flowing in. Loss is a vital component of gain, of new, fresh resources. I mean, just look at your life. Something had to die for every good thing you have to be born. This idea that if your mind is just perfect, that nothing bad will ever happen to you. I'm not saying that your mind isn't powerful. But if you came here thinking nothing bad is ever going to happen to you, you stepped into the wrong universe. You're sharing this world with a lot of people. And this human body, it has a timer on it. It will expire, as will the lives of your parents, your loved ones, your children, every pet you ever buy. To cling to it and try and keep everything the same starves it of energy and kills it. To avoid it keeps you from participating in life. Instead, you just have to see it in its proper context. It's one of the mechanisms of life. So anything you have that you treasure is going to be taken from you. And in being taken from you, your next steps will be handed to you. The closest you're going to get to a static, free life is a life where you stop insisting that it be anything different than it is. And you know what? That goes a long way. Your biggest source of suffering is not loss. Your biggest source of suffering is resistance to loss. Your biggest source of suffering is the lie that you tell yourself that you are heading towards this moment where you're suddenly complete and the credits can roll. It puts you in a state of constantly isolating the downfall from the upswing. In doing so, you accentuate the downfall, you magnify the downfall, and make it this damaging story. The real purpose of a downfall is to make room for the next upswing. A deeper purpose of every downfall is to prepare you for your death, which is coming. Not because I say so. It just is. We have to train ourselves not to cling. When you sit in meditation, when you first start learning, mostly people don't use meditation. They'll instead do concentration, where you are holding the mind really tight. It's not really a long distance strategy though, right? You can't go very far with that because you're spending so much of your energy holding everything in place. And you don't really get the same realizations from that because nothing can flow, right? You're almost being miserly. You're clinging to something. And so it's not allowed to leave and nothing new can come in. I think in the first few minutes of meditation, that's a little helpful, right? It takes whatever cycles are in motion and forces them to stop. But it's not meditation. Meditation begins when you just let go of everything inside of you that can't sit still. Meditation begins as soon as you cling to nothing. When you stop insisting on comfort and entertainment and happiness, and you let your mind just be an open gate, present for this moving, breathing, living moment. When you do that, your problems are no longer present. Not because the physical details of them have changed, but because you've stopped interpreting them as problems. You've let go of the meaning that you assign to them, and you can actually be comfortable. Just brings clarity, sanity, functionality to everything. But it doesn't come from pushing away pain. It comes from giving pain its space, letting it live out its own cycle, free of your manipulation. I've told the story before. When I first started meditating, I had horrible pain in my spine from having had meningitis. And I would sit in this little room, and my pain was distracting to everybody in the room. These were adept meditators. And I knew I needed to be able to sit or I wouldn't be able to study with my teacher. And so I went up to the mountains because I just happened to have mountains nearby. And I just trained myself to sit on rocks. I trained myself just to be in all sorts of uncomfortable situations. And I pushed and I pulled and I tried for a long time to just get over it. And then one day I was just walking to this little meditation hut, and I just had this deep thought of what if it were just okay to be in blinding pain? What if that didn't have to be a problem? From that moment, I never had any more pain when I sat in meditation. Not because I pushed the pain away, but because I stopped bothering to interpret it. I stopped insisting that the moment be different than it is. So life is going to be a constant flux of wins and losses. And the losses are not worse than the wins. The two are a part of each other. They're both relatively meaningless. It's just part of being in this universe. What's meaningful is the transformation you make to yourself in how you systematically assign meaning to everything. Okay, what's meaningful is not having more wins and less losses, or vice versa. What's meaningful is having the willingness to stand open in the face of either. Now, when that happens, you'll find the pendulum stops swinging so wildly between the wins and the losses, because you're not magnifying them anymore with your attention. And so they just stay a little more narrow, a little more balanced. But it doesn't matter. You're not doing it for that reason. You're doing it because there is nothing to be gained from constantly mourning everything that doesn't meet this story in your head. So Anna is saying, so we can overcome pain if we stop feeding it energy. Yes, but you won't overcome pain unless you stop caring whether or not you overcome it. You have to let it be what it is. There has to be room in this world for all of it. Whatever you are saying no to in this life, you are holding to yourself. Because whatever you resist, you have to keep one hand on it in order to continue pushing it away. So if you don't want pain, stop playing with the idea of wanting or not wanting pain. Stop playing with pain. Let pain be pain. You be the watcher of your breath. Or be in pain in full awareness and feel it as deeply as possible. Whatever it takes to stop resisting. But you'll probably have some time of struggle with that. Because most people, while they're doing it for understandable reasons, right? It's understandable to want to be out of pain. They're doing it for the wrong reasons. If pain is here, it's here to teach you something. Receive the lesson. You don't have to seek it out, but if it's here, receive the lesson. Let it breathe. Let it do its thing. Be the best person in pain you can possibly be. Let it be exactly what it is. Everything else will be a temporary fix. Every little stretch you do, going to be a temporary fix. It's like trying to change your spouse. The little things you do, they don't work. All the passive-aggressive little things you do, they don't work. Those frank conversations you have, they change it for 12 hours? At the end of the day, the only luck you're going to have is with unconditional acceptance. Funny thing about that is it tends to change things. But if you're doing it for that reason, it won't. So when you think about something like that, Anna, don't think about the mechanism. Don't think about tweaking the mechanism of the pain. Think about tweaking the mechanism of your resistance. You do that, and the rest will take care of itself. Are there any questions about any of that? I was kind of told tonight that we need to talk about loss, and I think that's my spiel on loss. Stop avoiding loss. Loss is part of gain. Recognize that when it comes and accept it, so that you can be a part of the bigger game, which involves you kind of transcending those stories, functioning within them, but having a part of you awake above the level of the stories. The best way to practice that is meditation. Why? Because meditation brings every demon you have to the front of your mind. It brings discomfort to your body. It brings impatience to your heart. It stirs the muddy pond. And then you have a chance to just be with it all. All right. I've gotten a little verbose. Why don't we step into meditation now? But if any of you have any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat, and I'll keep an eye out for them. So open yourself up. Place a bit of your attention at the forehead and crown. Let your eyes just fall to a spot on the floor in front of you or the desk in front of you. And just make yourself available as you breathe in and breathe out. Whatever arises, don't manipulate it. Don't push it away. Just let it sit with you in your meditative state. It's just unresolved energy. Let it flow. It'll spin around a couple of times and take care of itself. I know some of you are probably more ready than others to hear a teaching like this. But if you hear a teaching that really resonates with you, when a class is over, write it down. Something that'll help you get back there. And then get yourself some little object that you can carry on you to remember, to help you remember what you don't want to forget. Let's meditate. And those of you who have heard that story from me before, don't boil it down to what you already understand about it. Keep the lid off the jar. Let it expand. Spiritual teachings are not finite. You can go deeper and deeper and deeper. Be aware of that tendency inside of yourself to want to put a bow on it or compare it to something you already know. I hear that a lot. People say, oh, that's just like this. It may be just like that in a way. But by doing that, you're tying it up so that it can't keep expanding in you. Teachings like that are eternal. Keep the lid off the jar. And just shift your attention away from it, back to the breath. Nothing to hold down or control. Nothing to play with either. Let your body become curious about the stillness. Let your heart become curious about release. You're drowning in knowledge. It's the source of so many limitations. Trade in your answers for questions. Open it all back up. Let it breathe and grow and expand and bloom. That's the meditative state. There's nothing to figure out. Who cares? Who cares what you did before this or what you're going to do afterwards? Let it go. Let the wind take it. And just be in this living question of a moment. When I sit down to teach, I don't sit down with a pile of answers. I step into a question, and it all just flows. Answers can flow because I let go of the answers I have. I don't cling to them. Can you see how it's all the same thing? The same light shining on different aspects of different topics. It's a state of being. You have to catch it. everybody. I have this feeling like we should close up for the night. But again, if there's something really strongly resonating within you, write it down and get some small physical object to help you keep it in the space a little bit. Something that just when you look at it, it keeps that part of you lit up. Not to hold in place, but so that it can keep expanding. If you don't, it's okay. It's in there. It'll continue to grow in your subconscious, and then a few years from now, you'll be walking down a street and you'll just have this explosion of a realization. But it's nice when we can interact consciously with these things. It's an important skill set. Any questions or anything about any of that before we close up? Thank you. You guys wouldn't be here if you weren't prepared to do something with it. Life would not let you hear it. I've seen it over and over again. People who are trying to get to class, but something always gets in the way because they're just not ready to do anything with it, which is fine. But that's not you. All right, everybody. Have a great night. I will be here again next week. Thanks for coming.